Welcome back to another episode of the Fixed Ops Mastermind podcast. Before we get started, I would like to ask you to go to Apple Podcast and leave us a 5-star rating and review. It helps us get this podcast out to more people that need it. Welcome back, everybody, to the Fixed Ops Mastermind podcast. Today we have with us Les Silver, who, if you've been around automotive in the last 30 years or so and you don't know his name, then you need to crawl out from under the rock that you're living under. Les was the CEO of Newgen Results Corporation back in 1982, I believe it was, when he started that. It just touched a lot of dealerships and helped a lot of dealerships and has grown from that now as, I believe, executive chairman of Keeps Corporation.
That's what they call me.
That's what they call him. And Les brings a ton of knowledge to all of us here in the automotive business and a lot of help. Les, thank you for joining me today.
Dave, thank you very much for having me. Appreciate it.
Excellent. For those who don't actually know you, give us a little synopsis of where you came from.
Well, got involved actually in the car business while I was still in school and worked in the dealership. Did mostly sales in the early days, but then when I went back to school, I worked part-time evening and weekends, did F&I, and got to love the car business at a very early age. Got into the computer industry for about 6 years, and then took the combination of what I learned and the love of the car business and what I learned in the computer business and started Newgen.
Excellent. And the rest is history from there, right?
From there, well, it was a 20-year run at Newgen, so that was a long haul. Had the good opportunity to start MPI, which has kind of pioneered electronic vehicle inspections in the day. Did that for about 10 years. And then have since, in the last 7 years, working with several of my sons, been involved with the Keeps and Dynatron corporations.
Yes, they're doing some great things. And the MPI certainly revolutionary for what was being done in the industry back then, and still evolving today. So one of your big things from my standpoint, anyways, is the perfect RO. So I wanted to ask you about that and your philosophy on the perfect RO.
Well, the perfect RO is about as elusive as Bigfoot, and we use Bigfoot as in our marketing campaign. But I thought it would be helpful for the industry to step back a little bit and understand, what are we trying to accomplish? What does perfection look like, even though it probably is very difficult to achieve. Unless you have a direction and know where you're going, you're never going to achieve it. So we look at the perfect RO as having two very complementary components to it. One is content. Are you selling what is legitimately needed for the customer based on their planned usage of the vehicle, their driving habits, year, make, model, etc.? Are we getting the content right? And as importantly, are we getting the price right? Because getting the content right but not getting the price right leaves an awful lot of money on the table. And we found that by focusing on both of those factors, we're able to substantially increase the performance of a service operation.
Yeah, I definitely believe the elusiveness of the perfect RO. And I had an advisor today that handed me an RO. I was dispatching today and handed me an RO that said install special order part.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we had to have a conversation again about making sure we have an actual complaint on that repair order.
Well, capturing what the customer came for. They came for more than your coffee and your donuts. They came for some reason on their vehicle. So understanding what that is and documenting it in such a way that whoever gets it next isn't scratching their head wondering, okay, what's this? And in particular, when the customer expresses a problem statement, when does it happen? What are the circumstances? Getting that depth of information onto the RO is a very important starting point to meeting the customer's expectations. Beyond that, though, there's a host of other things that need to be discussed for the customer's best interest. We often get this rap of, well, we're trying to sell too much. And my experience is it's very rare that anybody tries to sell too much. It's more common that nobody sells anything. But having said that, it's really a question of, are you doing what's best interest of the customer? And what's best interest of the customer is to let them know if there's things that are of concern or should be of concern on their vehicle, and present in such a way where they understand that the decision is theirs. So you're not pressuring them into buying something that they don't want or don't need. You're advising them, and you're letting them know what is in fact due on that vehicle. And if it comes across that you're always recommending something, it's because something is actually always due. And that's unfortunate, but if you look at some of the statistics, the car care industry has pegged unperformed services in close to the $50 billion mark each year, things that are necessary that aren't being performed. And worst case, that's a safety hazard. Best case, it's not maintaining the vehicle in such a way that the customer gets the pleasure of driving and the reliability and everything else associated with a well-maintained vehicle. So we shouldn't be apologizing for that. We should be learning how to present it in such a way where the customer says thank you, because they should. Even if they say no, they should be saying thank you, because there now is at least knowledge on the table of things that are legitimately needed.
Right. And obviously that all kind of goes back to building a relationship with your customer so that you can, we changed the names from service writers to service advisors a long time ago for that reason. Yeah. Right. Was they were there to advise the customer about things that are needed on their vehicle. And if they build that relationship with the customer so the customer trusts what they're telling them, then presenting them with what their car actually needs shouldn't really be much of an issue, and should be first and foremost what is always done is presenting everything that vehicle needs and assembling it in an order to help the customer understand what's safety, what needs to be done now, what's maintenance that can absolutely needs to be done but doesn't need to be done today, and cosmetic things that if you wanted you could wait forever and not do.
Exactly. And one of the things that shoots us in the foot, we're often in the case where we try to get too much on a single visit. And many pay plans are structured around sales per repair order. That's short-sighted, in my view. You want to recommend what's due on the vehicle, but you want to give the customer options as to the timing in which they get it done. If it takes 2 or 3 visits, that may knock the heck out of your hours per RO, but is a much better customer situation. And if you look at the value that you're able to generate from that customer over time, splitting it up may be the right answer, and giving the customer those kinds of options so that you really are their partner. The relationship that you want to have isn't that of an intimidator, that isn't that of an accommodator. It's the relationship of being a partner. And if you can position yourself as the partner with the customer in taking care of their vehicle, then you've got a relationship that you can count on.
Yeah, and certainly pay plans play a big part in some of the bad rap this industry has gotten. In our call on the Fixed Ops Mastermind last night with Adam Aarons, Adam had mentioned that one of the the things he puts into his pay plan for his advisors is a retention bonus, if you will, so that
Per customer.
per customer, that they
Yeah.
get a bonus if the customer comes back to them a 10th time, and now that's helping to set the advisor up for wanting to put the customer on almost like a payment plan, right? To say, this is what you should do today, this is what you should do your next visit, and they set them up for that, and have no reason to not help a customer do that.
Well, we've talked about, you and I, the dentist as a model, the way they manage their practice, and the notion of inspect, which you get done regularly at the dentist. They do a cleaning, they do an inspection, and quite frankly, the whole idea of MPI and the Know Your Vehicle report, and its treatment plan, we stole from the dentist, and we are able to lay out, here's what you'll need, here's the urgency that's associated with it, break it up, and do it in a way that is most advantageous to the customer, and their pocketbook. The reality is, if you offer a customer a couple $1,000s worth of services, many just say no out of reflex, because they don't have the $2,000 just lying around waiting to be used to fix their car. And things like financing repairs are starting to become much more common as well, where 5 years ago there wasn't really a very good repair financing option. Now there are several in the industry, and giving that customer that as an option, and not only when they're maybe distressed financially, but just if you can offer the customer 90 days, 0 interest, good as cash, even if the guy's sitting on a wall full of money,
right,
he may want to take advantage of that, and you could be a hero. So mention it.
Right.
The thing I found is, if you don't mention it, you have no chance of ever getting it. But if you learn how to mention it in the proper way, you have a very good chance, a surprisingly good chance.
Right. Is it Wayne Gretzky that said you miss 100% of the shots you don't take?
Yes.
It's, that's one of the problems with a lot of advisors out there is they haven't been trained on how to properly present things to a customer, so that it's understandable for the customer, it's easy for the customer, and it is in the best interest of the customer.
And they're often judging the situation from their own personal perspective. Well, I don't have that kind of money, I wouldn't spend it. They're prejudging, instead of presenting it in a positive way and letting the customer decide.
Right. Yeah, that's one of the things that we always talk about is not selling from your own wallet. Because whether it's a repair that you would choose to do yourself, or a repair that you wouldn't do because you don't have that kind of money, that doesn't mean you get to make the decision for the customer. Certainly the
one of the things that we've been thinking about over the years, and haven't yet get to it, but I hope to before I hang it up, in fact, is the notion of understanding, what did we sell that customer over time? What did the vehicle need? Because every vehicle is quite different, actually, in what it would need over time, both in schedule maintenance and the likelihood of different repairs that are vehicle specific. So what was needed over time, and how much of that were we successful in retaining in the dealership? You mentioned Adam in the conversation you had with him last night. He mentioned that he has a difficult time measuring retention, because what is retention? Is it the General Motors retention, which is it came in for one or more visits in the space of a year, even if all he bought was an oil change, or is it, well, over the second year of ownership, you should have had $300 worth of service and you had 50, that isn't the same. And if you can measure over time what you're actually getting, from that customer, then who your better customers are, who your better service advisors are in presenting a long-term value proposition, and being able to measure retention in a much more accurate way. So write it down. Hopefully one day before I retire, we'll be able to shift the emphasis from what we'll call single transaction success to lifetime customer success.
Yeah. And as you start, you run through that, my head starts to think that's also a great way to start building a training plan for advisors. Because you will start to find your advisors who are weaker at selling over the long term, and your advisors who are stronger, and be able to actually tailor a training plan to those advisors to help them.
Yeah, when we were chatting a little while ago about the perfect RO and the content portion of the RO, one of the things that seldom happens, is the conversation with the customer about their plan for the vehicle. Because what's appropriate for that customer, isn't the same if they're planning on trading it in a month from now, as to if they plan to keep it for 3 years. And the things that you'd be recommending in many ways are dependent on the customer's plan. And yet, I can't think of many times, if any, where I've heard a service advisor ask the customer that question. What's your plan for this vehicle? And the customer says, well, it's a lease vehicle and I plan to turn it back at the end of the lease. The conversation is around, well, here are the things you need to do to not get surprised by a $2,500 bill, as we talked about again yesterday.
Yes.
From the OEM on the lease turnback. Here's what you need to be doing all the way along. And couch it in those terms. If it's, well, I plan to buy it out after the lease and keep it for a number of years, then some of the things, particularly some of the fluid services that offer extended warranties, make a tremendous amount of sense, good sense from the customer's perspective, and could be presented in that context. But unfortunately, we don't ask, we don't keep track of it, and therefore it's, what can we do for you today?
Yeah, and that is the first time I heard you talk about that. It definitely was a revelation for me, because it really does change, or should change rather, how you treat that customer when they come in, or how I don't mean treat in whether you're nice to them or not nice to them. I mean treat in the way of Mr. Jones is coming in and Mr. Jones leaves this car sitting in his garage for 7 months a year while he's in Florida. That gentleman is going to get treated much differently than Miss Jones, who drives her car 17 hours a day and runs it as an Uber. She has a lot different maintenance plan that we should have her on.
And wouldn't it shock the customer if you actually knew that? If you asked them today, what's the plan? He says, well, I'm a snowbird and I'm in Florida, 7 months of the year. And he comes back a year later and you were able to say, oh, welcome back. How was Florida? Yeah. And car's been sitting for 7 months, not a lot of mileage, but there's some time-based things that we need to be recommending and you need to be doing.
Yep.
Just a whole different way of developing a relationship.
Yeah, people talk about wanting the Amazon experience, if you will, from the dealership, where obviously Amazon is watching all your buying habits and things and recommending things to you on what you buy and all of that type of thing. And as dealerships, you would think we'd be on the forefront of that type of thing with the amount of data that we do have. But I think we really lag behind in that type of treatment of a customer, because we have so much information that we could use to help our customers, and it seems like we neglect that more often than not.
Yeah, how much time goes into preparing for the visits that you're going to have tomorrow? You've got, call it 60-70% of your tomorrow's traffic have made a reservation. You know who they are, you know when they're coming, and you know what they've asked for. Why don't you spend 5 minutes looking at the history of that vehicle, so you're not doing it under the pressure of the customer sitting in front of you, where it's prepare, make some notes, write them down, and say, hey, I looked over your file last night. Then pick the customer off the floor, because that would be so shocking that anybody took the time to prepare. And I see that last time you were in, we saw that your brakes were at 4 millimeters. We probably should take another look at them today, don't you think? And let the guy know that you care.
Revolutionary.
Revolutionary.
The simple things that we don't do. I always tell my advisors, I go back to when I was first writing service on the first time I was at a place that had ADP, so we were writing on computers, and I still made notes, handwritten notes on the repair order about the customer, whether that was a customer that was waiting, which back in '87, waiting really wasn't much of a thing. Everybody just dropped their car off and left, but I made notes about what they talked about while we were there. If he said he was, he had to get going quickly because he had to go to a meeting, I made a note that he had an important meeting. And when I would call him later that day to go over recommendations, that was the first thing I brought up was, how was your meeting? Did it go okay? Yeah. And we have more technology now to be able to store that information so that you can readily access it and use it. And it seems like we use it less.
It's really a shame. I call the minute that you spend in chit chat the 1 minute insurance policy, because if you can develop rapport by noticing, they've got a bag of hockey equipment in the back seat, and strike up a conversation about what about the Golden Knights and how they managed to lose 2-1 last night. Vegas, as you know, is one of my hometowns. Now we're still in it, at least. Boston isn't.
Yeah, we're out.
Sorry for that shot. But if you can consciously spend the time to develop rapport and do it in a way where it's natural. If you come across just as being a phony, that'll get picked up too. But if you like people and if you have a genuine interest in what they are, you can find something to talk about. And when you spend that minute doing that, it's an insurance policy, because if you screw up later on, it'll give you some level of coverage. Right. It won't necessarily fully insure, it won't protect you 100%, but it gives you the opportunity to be at least treated like a human being on the other side.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of the things that I've always done is tried to build that rapport with the customer. You try to get to that, I think it's an old phrase in the business, but the key tosser, who would just come in, toss you the keys, do what it needs. I know you're going to take care of me. And that you have to build a relationship with the customer to do that. And like you just said, it doesn't take a lot of time. It's a minute at the car. You can look inside the car while you get the mileage and see something in the car that you can start a conversation with, a bumper sticker on the back of the car. It doesn't take a lot. It's a simple process.
Yeah, it takes not being run off your feet, which today still is a problem. Back in the early days of Newgen, before we did customer retention, we did shop scheduling, and we did appointments taking, and we said, hey, why are all your customers there first thing in the morning? And when you ask that question, the answer is because that's what you've told them.
That's what we told them.
You said to them, bring it in, earlier the better.
Yep.
And guess what? They listened to you.
Mm-hmm.
So they were there, and we said, offer them a time that's off peak as your first salvo, and you'll surprise yourself. For some people, they don't realize that that's an opportunity, and they're grateful because they would like to drop their kids off at school or do an errand and then bring their car in without having to believe the only way you're going to get service is to bring it in first thing in the morning. So getting yourself in a position where you don't have that crush of people and you can devote, do people want to spend 15 minutes in the write-up process? Well, they certainly don't if you're not talking to them. If you're talking to them, they're happy to spend 15 minutes on their car and their situation. But a minute of wait time where you're dealing with somebody else and ignoring them is very different from the minute of service time where you're taking the time to find out whether they like hockey and engage in that conversation.
Absolutely. It definitely is. And I can remember back in the day telling people, when should I drop the car off? We open at 7:30. I'm not going to tell you when to drop it off, just we open at 7:30. And it was,
there they are.
Yes, open the doors and there's 30 people.
At 7:30.
Exactly. It's exactly what it was.
I did a seminar one time where we had trained the dealership to spread out the arrival of their customers, and the service manager said, we've been very successful at that. We have people coming in, throughout the day. One of the other service managers said, well, how long did that take? And he said, well, it took 2 years. And then I said, 2 years? Why did it take 2 years? He said, well, for the first year and a half, I knew I couldn't do it. And getting that mindset around, you can do it, if you just approach it properly, and again, with the customer's best interest, is a tremendous thing to be able to see it happen.
Right. The we've always done it that way thinking gets in our way a lot of times and prevents a lot of innovation that we could have if we could just get out of our own way. Let's talk a little bit about what you're doing with Dynatron and what you guys have going on.
In growing revenue, you've got really 3 knobs you can turn. One is get more visits. The second is get more out of each visit that you've got. And the third is charge what's appropriate for it. Those are the 3 knobs. Back at Newgen, we were primarily associated with how do you get customers back. At MPI, it was how do you get a little bit more out of the RO. At Dynatron, we're starting to do a little bit of those too, but our main emphasis has been on pricing. The perfect RO, perfect content, and perfect price. Perfect price means knowing what is being charged in your market for comparable services. Before we went live on the podcast, you were mentioning the fact that when you got to your current store, you went out and did a little bit of neighborhood shopping and found that the pricing that you had was low in the market, not even comparable to what was being charged in the aftermarket.
Right.
You need to know that. You need to know what the competitors, both dealership and aftermarket competitors, are doing. You need to know not only price, but you need to know the other elements of the value proposition, so you can present your price in the context of the total service that you're offering, and be happy to dare to compare. If you know what your price is and you know what your market is, then your big sign of here's where we are for this item and here's where our competitors are. Even if you're a little bit higher, I don't propose that you need to be the cheapest in town, because generally your value proposition is stronger in the other things that come along with the service than many of your competitors. But you need to be proud of it. And if you're proud of it, your service advisors become proud of it. And very often, because they don't know how you compare, they're ashamed because they don't know what the price is and they don't know how you compare in the marketplace. So they're reluctant to present, simply because they don't have that information. So we have found over the years that there are several issues when it comes to price, starting with the retail. The retail price, many dealerships still have, a door rate, which they refer to. But in reality, the door rate is not used all that often. For competitive repairs, lube oil filter, or maintenance, most of the items are menu priced. Where you're assembling a price, which is typically a repair, you have a lot more flexibility in the customer's understanding of what the competitive market is. They've established in their mind through the competitive items whether you're in the right ballpark or not. And on the repair side, you have a much better opportunity to get what you're really worth than in the areas where price visibility and competitive tension drives your price down. But it's important that you know it. So we look at what are you charging? The perfect price is that price where it's not too high, where you're scaring people off, so retention isn't compromised, and not too low, where you're leaving money on the table. And it's quite frankly just a business decision. It's economics. Supply and demand cross at a certain price point, and you need to be on top of it, not once a year, but you need to be on top of it all the time. Right. So are you establishing and reviewing prices on a regular basis, particularly on customer pay, on The repair pricing, are you using some sort of a step grid for labor pricing, or are you doing a flat, hourly door rate? We found it's often more effective to utilize a labor grid on the labor side. So we help establish and fine tune those grid price opportunities. So the issue is, what is the price that you've established? And then the second issue is it actually being followed? Unlike most other retail organizations, there are many knobs that can be twisted by technicians and service advisors to modify price to result in you not getting what you expected. And in most cases, it's unknown. It's a leak that happens. There's very little visibility to it. So a part of what we've done at Dynatron is we've been able to look at every line item of every RO every day and be able to look at, was it priced properly? Not too high compared to the management established price, not too low compared to the management established price. In either one is bad. We hear sometimes from the service manager, well, Joe, he didn't get what he was supposed to get on this one, but look what he got on the other one, where he gouged the customers, poked his eyeballs out, and everybody said, oh, that's good. Well, it's not really. If we establish a price, high or low is bad. It should be priced to the penny on what we said the price was. So that's a large element of what we do at Dynatron. What we have found is when you are attuned to that, you find yourself in a position where following the rules set by either the OEM or the state that you're operating in has an impact on the way you get reimbursed for warranty. And if you're on top of your retail, then that leads to being able to have an opportunity by being a proper rule follower to get more than you did get on the warranty side. And that's on labor in every state, and in 46 of the 50 states, it's on parts as well, where you can charge a parts markup that's equivalent to what you're charging the retail customer. And that doesn't mean that you're charging the suggested retail price for parts, because your retail price, particularly on repairs, is usually governed by a parts grid. And you're not charging, the list price for the part. You're typically charging something that's more substantial than that. And if you do the right analysis and if you do the right documentation, you can go from the typical 40% markup, that the OEM is used to, into something that often is well over 100%. But it requires careful analysis. We have the analytical tools in our software product to take the repair orders, do the analysis, and be able to get an extraordinary jump. We went over 2,000 customers, and the amount of extra bottom line profit. And if you look at what a price increase does to bottom line profit, almost all of it flows to the bottom line. If you just take away a little bit in commissions here and there, technicians are already paid, lights are already paid for. An additional buck is, probably 90 to 95% bottom line profit. Most shops can use that.
Yeah, I would say all shops could use that. And those are kind of some of the things that you mentioned in there that are, I was about to say little things. They're big things, but most advisors don't realize it's happening, and probably a lot of service managers don't realize it's happening. That when those prices are being adjusted, both on the labor side and the parts side, that it is hurting their chances of getting those increases. Because of what it's doing to when you're trying to get your analysis of what you need to get those increases, and if they've been playing with prices to change prices around, that definitely impacts being able to get those increases, and so it hurts in the long term.
Yeah, and that doesn't mean, by the way, that you shouldn't offer discounts to customers in the right circumstances.
Right.
There are circumstances where discounting is appropriate. In my view, what's never appropriate is just adjusting the price. That it was $150 and you just mark it at 100, if it was 150 and you want to give a $50 discount, market $50 discount,
Right.
net price 100, and let the customer know that they got something special. Let you, as a service manager, know that this wasn't willy-nilly, that this was something that was done for a reason, so that both you can control, discounts is a marketing expense.
Mm-hmm.
And unless you can isolate it where you know that here's what I gave away in discounts this month, you have no way is possible in managing it. And it becomes a free-for-all. So don't discount to negatives and positive.
Right.
You should do discounts properly, but do it in a way where it's absolutely mandatory to be visible. And that way, where you started and where you ended up.
Yeah, the transparency in this industry is a must, you're right. It becomes untrackable for us, and if you can't track something and measure it, then it's impossible to be able to control it and to be able to help the entire business. Les, thank you very much. This has been an awesome conversation with you tonight. And I wish you some continued success, and I hope before you do hang it up that you get the rest of that out there, because I could use that information. So you can put that together.
I'm getting a little slower. I turned 70 in May, and I must admit I've lost a step or two. But what you make up in energy, hopefully you make it up in wisdom. And,
there you go.
Been around to see a fair bit and happy to share it.
Awesome. Well, we greatly appreciate you sharing it with us, and you have a terrific evening, and hope to see you again soon.
Thanks, Dave. Take it easy.
Take care. Everyone, Les Silver, thank you again, Les. An incredible conversation. Once again, 5-star review, Apple Podcast. We are grateful for those reviews and ratings. It helps us to get the podcast out to others that need it. And also, Fixed Ops Mastermind Leaders Group meets Tuesday nights at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. If you wish to join that membership, fixedopsmastermind.com is where you would go to join that. And the Wednesday webinars, we're exploring whether we're going to have them on at different times, but make sure you register for those. And you'll also be granted access into the Fixed Ops Mastermind community portion of the website, where you can see recordings of those webinars and engage with all the other members. Some very, very valuable information in there, and valuable interactions with others. So fixedopsmastermind.com, and also register for the Fixed Ops Mastermind webinar series. Thank you very much, and we'll talk to you next time.